Welcome to the show. I'm Malak Fuad, and this is What I Did Next from ANT Media. In this series, we talk to inspirational guests about those moments in life when you're faced with a crossroads and have to decide which way to go. Do you choose the well-worn shore route, or do you jump off the deep end and hope it will all work out? Our guests have all confronted this dilemma, and we discuss how this happened and how it changed the course of their lives. Naguib, Samih, Nasif. These three names are synonymous with success in Egypt and the Middle East as a whole. The Sawiris brothers are so well known that first names are all that's needed for people to know who they are. They continue to capture the imagination decades after first making their mark on the business and social landscape. My guest today is Samih. We met at the end of 2020 for our interview. He is the founder of Orascom Development Holding, which operates 33 hotels with over 7,000 rooms and controls approximately 100 million square meters of land. He's perhaps best known as the man behind El Gouna, a tourist resort town on the Red Sea coast of Egypt. Gouna prides itself on its eco-friendly and sustainably minded approach to living. It boasts a large community of Egyptians and expats alike, and is loved for its relaxed lifestyle. Alongside Gouna, Samih has also put his name to some very innovative resorts in Oman, Montenegro, and Andermatt in Switzerland, among others. Aside from all this, Samih is above all a sort of Renaissance man, and a person who doesn't define himself by his career or profession. He has a multitude of interests, and he consciously prioritizes the work-life balance. Now that he's no longer involved in the day-to-day running of the company, he's spending time developing his passions and checking off his extensive bucket list. We began our conversation by zooming in on one of the show's regular features, discussing the books and music that inspire him.
I actually get my most important inspirations in life from hot showers in the morning. They usually result in the best ideas.
The ideas come to you then.
Newest revelations, and it's really that. I have this habit of taking very prolonged showers in the morning, not because I need to stay like that long, but it actually is a time of reflection and so on. And then swimming, which I do when when I am allowed. I swim practically every day, and that is the time of organization.
So that's quite meditative, swim.
No, the swim is not meditating for me at all. It's really a a functional session of planning. So what am I going to do today? What am I going to do tomorrow? What did I do yesterday that I didn't finish? And
how
so
interesting. So it's as if you're writing in your calendar.
Yeah.
Wow. With timings and the whole thing?
Not to that
Not
extent,
so much.
but at least to make a full plan
Yeah.
of action and reflect on the previous day.
Very interesting. Are you a reader or not really?
Not as much as I used to be, and not as much as I would like to be. I find reading books are very not only informative, but forming. The more you read, the more you can adjust and complement what you're doing. So,
are you predominantly, when you have the time, do you read fiction or non-fiction?
I like to read mainly history, because for me, history is revealing the future. So if you know how people used to live for a long time in a certain place, you can have some estimate of what they're up to, or what they could be doing, or how they will interact in certain situations in the future. So it's quite eye-opening.
And do you like a particular period of history, or do you prefer to think of the individual?
No, not at all. I concentrate much more on nations.
Oh, on nations, I see.
So what happened in the middle century in Europe? When did Europe really become a civilization? And how many wars did they have? And then when you find out that these guys have been killing each other for like hundreds of years, you understand things like the First and Second World War.
Yeah. And what about films?
Not really. I use films basically to fall asleep. So before I sleep, I put something on Netflix. Usually it takes me 5-6 nights to watch a movie. It's quite rare that I watch a movie.
Whole thing. Yeah. And what about music? I know that music has taken a big proportion of your life now.
Yes.
What sort of, you're a big classical music fan.
Yes.
Do you have other styles of music you like?
Well, of course I do, but let's say my heart is really in classical music, and it's the type of music that I could listen to most of the time. But I'm very open to, let's say I like Kulthum. I like very old classical Arabic music. And then I love the trashy, cheap belly
Nightclub.
dancing. I found our new Arabic songs have become really forming in a way that it transpires this spirit of let's have fun,
Yeah.
which is very typical for the Egyptians.
very
and
Egyptian
the
trait.
songs now are becoming more and more inducive of that mood. So I love this kind of music as well, but I wouldn't listen to it.
Sure.
Let's put it this way:
If
if
you're-
we're sitting here alone, I would not listen to it.
If you're in a bar or a club, you'll have
Bar,
fun listening
club,
to it.
but I find that they've found a way of putting some atmosphere.
But we Egyptians have always had a sense of humor, and it comes through in most things we do.
Yes.
And so the fact that it's coming through in the lyrics of the new music is very telling.
Yes.
Yeah. And you obviously you said classical music is a big part of your life. Which composer or which composers would you single
Again,
out?
it's a matter of the mood. If you're in the morning, obviously before breakfast or during breakfast, you're not going to listen to Wagner. But let's say in the evening, you're just out of the shower and you're getting ready to go out and you're going to have a drink, then that would be like the perfect.
Because he's quite a dramatic composer, right?
Dramatic and very lively. Then if you're in the car and you're listening to music, then why not a Brahms symphony, and then if you're in a mellow mood, then usually I shift to piano concertos, and there's a lot of very good ones.
What would you say would be, if you had to single out 2 or 3 pivot points in your life?
Well, the first one obviously was, where am I going to study? So having finished school, the choice was obviously anywhere. And I fortunately had very good grades, so that this widened even the choice of universities wherever.
And you had a German education.
Because I had a German education, it somehow seemed closer to home and easier to go to a German university and not to the USA, for example, which would have been a bit alien to me at that time. So that's what I did, and it was very pivotal.
And where did you go?
I went to Berlin to the technical university there, and I studied engineering and economics. They have this combination, and I already had assumed that after I finish my studies, I will come back and start a business, whatever it is. But it was always clear for me that I'm going to need to make a lot of money if I want to be happy. And that's the best way to do it, is to start a business. And I said the best education would be something that combines the knowledge of engineering, which was my passion, and the economics, which is something that you need to understand.
Mm-hmm. It's a practicality. And I'm always interested, because I've obviously watched a few interviews with you in preparation for today. Why is it that the three of you, your three brothers, decided to all set up on your own, as opposed to pooling together into something common?
Well, because we are different, as much as we look alike, but we are quite different. And we always felt that competing within the same box would end up in ugly disputes and fights and so on. So it was safer for our relationship, which we cherish very much, which has kept also all these years, would be best served if everybody is his own boss. You put 3 bosses in a box, everybody wants to boss the others,
Of
doesn't
course.
work. So that's why really. And my father encouraged us to do our thing.
As he did.
And as he, wanted also for his children to benefit from the fact of doing something alone versus copying or following or being part of what he has.
Mm-hmm. So the university in Germany was a pivot point, perhaps your first pivot point. What would you say came after that in terms of the next shift?
Well, the next shift was rebelling against a marriage that wasn't working. And, we as Copts and Orthodox, it's a tough decision.
Absolutely.
And it defies common practice, common accepted norms. So that was a big pivot. In between that, it was all about business, creating wealth, making sure that you stand on your own and that you have everything that you want and a bit more, so as to be able to give happily. Because, when you don't have a lot, it's not as easy to give.
Of course.
When you have a lot, it's much easier.
Of course. I think also the personal pivot you mentioned about your marriage breakdown was a very public one in
Yes.
Egypt, to say the least.
Yes.
And I think you paved the way actually for a lot of other people after that to feel a bit more confident to take the path they wanted.
I don't know about that, but I just know that was a challenge worth taking. But in my life, I've always felt that norms and regulations and rules and I mean social norms, regulations, and rules are not as holy as they are portrayed, and that everybody should do his own thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially that most of them are outdated. You know,
exactly.
what my parents would have never dreamt of doing, my children are doing in front of my parents, and even my parents look at it as very normal.
Yeah.
Which means that the norms that people might be imposing on you will expire in 10, 20 years,
Absolutely.
but they don't know it.
I also find that we underestimate even the older generation sometimes, because I have a friend who went against the grain in something very unusual. And she expected the older generation, the 80-year-olds and so on, to be completely against it. And they were incredibly supportive. So I think, everyone has their own perceptions of what people are going to think.
I just think you have to develop your own set of rules and regulations and adhere to them, and not copy blindly things that others tell you, especially when you have some aspirations. A lot of times people will give you advice based on what they would have done had they been in this situation, which doesn't apply to you. So if somebody tells you, oh, it cannot be done.
Yeah.
Or how can you be so crazy to start something like this? It's never going to work. It's basically an advice, very often genuine, but they misinterpret their failures to do it themselves as a justification to give this advice. So I always tell people, listen, and then make sure when you take that speech that you analyze it and see if it applies to you or not.
It's their
very
own
often
fears.
you'll get advice that is well-founded. This will not work because when I tried it, I discovered that the law says you can't do it, for example. Okay, if you don't listen categorically, then you do the same exercise, and because of a certain law or a regulation, you will fail. So listening is always good, but
you take it all on board and then decide what to use and what not to use.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about having the guts to do something, and it's something that it's an important part of your makeup. How did you find the determination to begin Guna and then follow it through?
Out of fear of failure, because failure is something that would kill me, basically. So I don't like to fail, and I'm very persistent in the pursuit of success, even if it's at the end of the world or at the end of my life. But I don't really like to give up sooner than necessary. So, I mean, it took me 30 years to give up doing a project in Cuba.
You started a project in Cuba? I didn't know that.
28 years ago, I was going to do a project there, and I finalized drawings and formed the company, and then it didn't work. Then I tried again 10 years later. They hadn't changed. Then I tried again a few years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. They were just as bad. So I finally gave it up.
And that's probably a sign of wisdom, that you've realized that it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you win some, you lose some. This is something that one has to learn. But I'm a bad loser, we are all bad losers, actually. Nasif less, Naguib as bad or worse.
Yeah.
Naguib used to have a sign in his office that says, "Show me a good loser, I'll show you a loser."
Absolutely, absolutely. Considering that you're also competitive, did that translate into sports for any of you? Are you competitive in sports, or is it purely in business?
Every time I started something to compete in sports, I found out early that I'm not going to be among the top, and I would give it up. But I am not competitive at all, actually. Contrary to what people might think.
You prefer to operate in empty spaces where you're king, right? That's what I've been reading about.
I hate competition, and I hate to compete. I hate the pressure it puts. I hate the compromises one has to do sometimes to be ahead of the others. I hate squeezing people just to get more than the others and so on. So I have always avoided in my life, actually, if you look at everything that I've done business-wise, hardly anything that I've done or any place where I've gone did I face a lot of competition, if any.
And the interesting thing in Guna is obviously it was a completely blank slate when you started. Obviously, it was completely empty. Did you, as time went on and things became a bit more structured and standardized, did you find that that was beginning to get a little bit of a straitjacket for you, that you couldn't be as inventive or as creative as you
Not
wanted?
at all. It's the
Not
other
at
way
all.
around. The further we progressed and the more success we had, the more courage I had to do more and more expensive things and more sophisticated things.
Can you give me an example?
Like, for example, it used to be a project, just a touristic development. And then one day I woke up and said, what is this? This should become a town.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had the means and I had the success, it was a plan that made sense. So, I mean, 10, 15 years later, but it would have been a joke if I had come to this piece of desert 30 years ago and said, I'm going to build myself a town.
Mm-hmm.
So the evolution and the innovation comes much easier when you have a base.
The facts are on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah. At the beginning, you had 2 hotels and then a few villas. And then at some point you said, we either grow or we stay, or
No.
What changed for you?
The growth was always a function of getting things to Guna that would not be sustainable at a small size. Like, I wanted a school. A town without a school doesn't make sense. But a town with 60, school with 60 kids doesn't make sense.
Of course.
So I need more people here. Then we need a hospital if somebody gets sick. And the hospital needs a lot of patients. Otherwise, it's an expensive place. And the good doctors don't stay in hospitals that are deserted, even if you pay them millions. So in a way, these factors are the ones that dictated growth, not the glory of being bigger. I mean, if I needed more, which I did at the time, the solution was to go somewhere else and start another one and another one and another one, not to just whip it to growth at any cost or any price. So growth has never been a motor for me as much as it was the need. There's a term that we use in this business called critical mass.
Yes.
And the critical mass is really critical. You don't have it, you don't have a town.
But how do you bring the people here? I mean, what
you attract them, you give them jobs. I did a brewery here because a brewery meant immediately 200 employees, a couple of engineers, a couple of foreigners, brewmasters, and so on. The winery, the same. The hospital, you get the doctors, they live here, they have homes, they have children, they send them to the school. The teachers in the school, they have their own children, they need to do this and that.
Of course.
So this is how you do it.
But for me, as a resident of Guna as well,
that's different, because you guys initially came here not as residents, but as a second home buyers.
Yeah.
The trend now is shifting, and now we have more people that are volunteering to come to live here, even though I did not provide opportunities or jobs for them. They came with their own ideas, they came with their own businesses.
But that came later.
They came much
That's obviously later. But what I find very fascinating about Guna is that there's a real sense of community. And there's a real sense that it's an organic town, even though it's man-made. Completely a new town.
Every town is man-made.
Every town is man-made, but it's a new town, and it doesn't feel like a new town. And the combination of foreigners, Egyptians, is unique, not just to Egypt, but to the entire region. And it just creates a very relaxed atmosphere. And I always think that that's a reflection of you, because you're a very relaxed person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a stressful.
Exactly. And it, we come through the gate of Guna by car from Cairo, and I can see all of us in the car just decompress. Literally, as we're coming through the gate of Guna. And I think that everyone I've spoken to who comes back and forth like we do feels the same. And there's something about the community here and the ease of the lifestyle, which is very conducive to that.
Because there is no stress. I mean, there are not many sources of stress here. It's not like you'll have some idiot block the road in front of you and just go out of the car and start chatting, because people are scared to do this here.
Yeah.
They know If you get on our nerves with this kind of attitude, your car will not be admitted to come into Luna. People feel safe because of all these safety precautions we have. We have more than 650 security personnel in this town.
And they're very efficient.
Because
We've
they
called
have
on them a few times.
sense of empowerment.
Yeah.
They know that they are respected. Nobody can bully them. You can't tell one of these security people, "Don't you know who I am?" And then scare the hell out of them.
Some people try.
They try, but
yeah.
Usually the reaction that they get when this security man complains to us is very demeaning to them.
Absolutely.
Like I've had a few people where I told them, if you don't apologize and the guy accepts your apology, your car is never going to come back.
Yeah, you're not welcome. Our show's other staple question got an unusual answer. Even though I asked him for his ideal 6 dinner party guests, Samih quickly fired back with just one name.
Jesus Christ. That would be my first choice.
Interesting.
Because I would need to understand more the philosophy and the background and why now. Why didn't you come 2,000 years earlier?
Or later.
Why in this Middle East and not somewhere else? So it would be more than enough to have dinner with Jesus without anybody else.
I don't think you need anyone else except
Exactly.
him. Absolutely. So you'd want a one-on-one with him, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I think you could go on for several evenings together anyway. It wouldn't just be one dinner.
I don't think I could have the privilege of taking so much time. So
what would you be? Those are interesting questions. Would you have, for example, if I was in that situation, I might want to ask advice.
Well, I would be asking questions to make up my mind about many intriguing issues where I'm not 100% sure that I'm right. And probably that would be the biggest purpose of that meeting, like what's next? What do you really expect from us? Do we really have to behave according to social norms, or as long as I feel comfortable with my life, am I okay with you? Like how bad is it?
Will you accept me?
How bad is it to be a little bit naughty? Like, where's the limit?
Yeah.
All of these questions. I mean, to just have
those are vital questions. Yeah.
Yes, and they're questions that I just genuinely don't believe can be answered by humans.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's everyone's guess what he should advise others, and not based on real knowledge.
And I think so much of generally, I mean, regardless of which religion, but so many religions are dogmatic in such strict parameters about how you should live your life. And in the end, it's between you and God, really.
Yeah, I mean, all the religions are tools for a human to develop a relationship with his creator. And it's up to you to choose the tools out of that toolbox. Like, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, these are toolboxes. You open them and you take the tools that you think will be useful for the errand that you have.
Do you consider yourself a religious person?
Well, it depends who you ask, because if you ask like a typical priest, he would say that guy's not religious. He hasn't been to church on Sunday every week, and he's been skipping church for a long time, so he's not religious. If you ask somebody who doesn't believe in God, he'll tell you, my God, this guy's crazy. He still believing in God and so on. So in a way, it's all relative. I am happy with my beliefs. I am happy with my relationship with God, meaning that I feel from time to time that I'm close, that I'm being blessed, that I'm being protected, that I'm being punished.
Yeah.
So as long as this interaction is happening, I feel happy with my religious and spiritual situation.
Tell me about, I know you had a bucket list, and I'd like to know what was on the original bucket list, because you've spoken about a couple of things that you've spoken about the fact that you finished the bucket list. But I'd like to know what was on it to begin with.
Well, when I was very young, I wanted toys and more toys. When I grew a little bit older, I wanted sports and more sports. And then I wanted girls and more girls. And then I wanted kids and more kids. And along that, always money. I always wanted to have money because I always considered money as a tool to give you more freedom and more ownership of your time. And that was the real purpose. Then I wanted, as I said, children, which I did. And I wanted to help, kind of like now it's time to give back. Since I have more than enough for myself, it's time to give back. And that also happened as part of the strategic bucket list additions over the years.
And hobby-wise, so I know you went around the world.
I used to go fishing all the time. I loved fishing so much that I practically fished all the seas of the world. I like hunting. As I said before, I like classical music, so I was a big fan of attending concerts left, right, and center. So these were all items on my bucket list that
you've checked off. And now you're focused on the piano as your final item.
Not final. I mean, this is the first item in the new bucket list.
In the new one.
Hopefully, by the time I finish this concert, I will have developed a few more.
And you're planning on having a concert here in Guna?
Also, yes.
And have you planned that out? You had said at the age of 65 you were going to do that?
Yes, I'm 65 until the 28th of January 23. So I have to do it before the 28th of January in 2 years. So I have 2 years left. I want to do the first one here. If I'm good enough, I will do the second one in Cairo. And then obviously the last one I'll do in Switzerland.
And are you practicing every single day?
Every day.
Every day. And you find it soothing, meditative?
No, frustrating.
It's frustrating you.
Because, at this age, to learn to play an instrument like the piano, it's very difficult. My memory was never my strengths. So to memorize all these notes, at the end of the day, when you give a concerto, you have to play for half an hour from memory.
And you're not following music. You're not following a sheet of music.
Of course I am, but
you are.
But you don't give concerts like this. Have you ever been to a?
But there's always a sheet of music in front of them.
Never.
No, isn't there?
Never. You have the sheets in front of the orchestra,
but
I not the soloist.
I see. Okay, so it's from memory. That's tough. That's very tough. And it's another language. The music
completely,
notes
but I mean everybody does it.
Yeah. So for you, it's a challenge.
Big challenge.
Yeah. Well, I will come and watch you for sure. For sure. So you've often spoken about persistence and guts as being as important as hard work.
They're more important.
More important. Tell me about
that.
that.
Hard work is linear.
Okay.
The more you work, the more you do out of these attributes or out of your luck. So let's say luck is 60%, persistence, perseverance, and guts combined are 14%, and intelligence is 14%.
So it's more about the persistence and guts.
14, 12, and 60.
So intelligence doesn't really play much of a role.
Of course it does. If you're less than 8 out of 14, you don't really stand a chance.
Yeah.
If you have very little intelligence, then basically you will not even recognize luck as such. But what I'm saying is that you don't need to be a genius. I mean, just above average with a lot of luck, you'll make much more money than Einstein and the German workaholic that works 14, 15 hours a day. But only work is linear. The more you work, the more you make out of your luck. But if you're not lucky, you can work your butt and you won't get anywhere.
Timing has a lot to do with things, I think.
That's part of the luck.
That's in luck.
Anything that you don't control goes into the 60%. You don't control where you're born. You don't control what background your parents have, what schooling they were able to provide you, what era. I mean, look at my father. He will tell you luck is 80% because he was literally successful. Every time he was successful, something out of his hands happened. His company he started reached too much of a size, so it was nationalized during Nasser. He goes to Libya, starts again. Then Gaddafi comes, so he goes back to Egypt and starts again. And in the beginning, when he started again, it was chaos.
But this is not only luck. This is a characteristic of someone who, I think you have it as well, who, will not accept no or will not accept
yes, but
any
he would
other
have
way.
been much more successful, let's say, than he finally was, had he not had all these hiccups.
Of course.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that luck plays a huge role, because for sure he's more intelligent and much more hardworking than me. But in his case,
I'm sure that those are obviously clear pivot points in his life, and one led to the other, and without one, the other wouldn't have happened, and so on. The whole destiny issue. He wasn't meant to be.
Lucky.
No, on the contrary, he wasn't meant to be in Egypt full time or in Libya full time or.
No. I think you're. No, I disagree. He would have. He was very, very Egyptian.
Yes.
Even going to Libya was a big pain for him.
Right.
I remember when they allowed people to leave the country, we were going to immigrate to Canada, and then nobody had I mean, my parents just didn't feel like leaving Egypt,
Mhm.
and the compromise was that he goes to Libya, where he can come every few weeks and so on.
And you were here.
And we stayed here.
Yeah. So you were still quite young at the time.
Oh yeah,
You were in your
kids.
you were teenagers.
Not even.
Yeah.
I mean, the nationalization took part 61, and I'm born 57, so
Yeah.
I was 13,
So
14.
your mother was in charge of 3 boys, which is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's a strong woman. I get the feeling that for you, balance is everything, and not too much of one thing outweighs the other.
Yeah, you should not allow any sector or anything in your life to overtake you. Like I find it a huge sacrifice for somebody to give up everything to be the number one runner, the number one jumper, the one,
Mhm.
you know, because I know what it takes to do that, and it's basically a write-off of everything but this.
Yeah.
And that is something that I would never do. That also applies to money. If you over focus on making money, you end up never having time to use
enjoy it.
or to give it away properly, you know.
And how have you instilled that in your children? Is that something that you were consciously trying to convey to them?
You can't convey anything to the generation that is now coming up, because they've learned very early that the parents are not really the best source of information. When we were growing up, there was no internet, there was nothing, even books were not so easy to get. And whenever you needed advice, the only knowledge that you found around you was your teacher or your parents.
Mhm.
So we had much more respect for their advice and their knowledge
Absolutely.
than the kids of today, who know that whenever they'll ask you something, probably you don't know it properly, or you don't know enough about it. So it's much better to ask Google, you know.
But I also think that children are extremely observant and
That's
absorb from their
of
parents
course.
just by seeing how they're living and what they're doing.
And the smart kids are the ones that will observe and avoid, not just copy. Sometimes you observe that your parents are doing something that is not very you know, and like I grew up seeing my father work ridiculously much, and I always told myself, that's not a life for me. I don't like working so much. It takes away the pleasure of other things in life, and I don't believe that God made us here to just work like
Absolutely.
crazy, you know. Like, this is the Calvinistic
Puritanical, yeah. Tell me a little bit about the last, or 2020, in the sense of how has the pandemic shifted your way of thinking, or what do you think we'll be looking at more in the future in terms of lifestyle?
Well, you know, 2020 to me was the worst year of my life, and I was doing the math. I actually had more issues 2020 than I had in my entire life combined. So
Gosh, that's a big sentence.
it is true, you know, like even medical health wise, you know, when you get your chicken pox and this kind of stuff, it's nothing.
Of course.
Your measles,
Yeah.
whatever. I had one big incident, which is the operation in my legs that went south, and
That was when you were much younger.
yes,
Yeah.
but that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Now, come this year, I start with a bad case of corona. I have to be hospitalized, and you know, at one point of time, you start worrying. I get out of this, I get cancer. I get out of this, I get have a car accident, and
This
I
is
fracture a
a
vertebra.
bad year.
And then, not to mention the business side,
Of
not
course.
to mention also some issues here
Yeah,
in Egypt,
yeah.
not to mention that my mother got very sick and we were like in a panic. Thank God she's okay now. Not to mention a separation. All
Yeah,
of these things ultimately
It's been a bad
hit
year.
me in
So this
2020.
is the ultimate pivot then, pivoting out of 2020.
Well, I'm very optimistic, and then I'm also very grateful because, you know, 2020 could have come at me with a knife or a gun, and not just a whip, because everything that happened to me
You had it under control at some point.
Constant whipping,
Yeah.
non-stop whipping the whole year, but there wasn't something that would I could have
broke
died
you.
from cancer, I could have died from COVID, I could have died in the car accident or lamed or whatever.
Of course.
So in a way, I have to be grateful that as much as it is, it could have been so much worse. And I'm looking at 21 and I'm saying, life goes on. Forget about 2020. Forget about everything that happened. Don't cry next to spilled milk.
It's a very good motto, and you're obviously an optimist and a positive person. How do you see yourself? I mean, has it made you reconsider certain things in life,
Nothing.
or not really?
Zero.
No.
Zero. This is a hiccup. This is a bad year. I'm going to be 64 in a few weeks. So what's one bad year in 64 nice years? And I always really look back at the good times, and I search for more good times, because the value of your life is how many good days did you live, not how much you have and so on. I heard one time a guy that was very, very rich and basically lost it all say this to a couple of friends: you guys are very poor, even though you think you're richer than me, because if you look back how much money I spent and how much I enjoyed spending it versus you that basically only now started making money and holding on to it on top of it. This is,
absolutely.
I'm much richer than you.
He's richer because he enjoyed it.
Yeah, so
of course.
I also think that in life, it's not about how much you still have or you can do. It's about how much did you enjoy it and how much did you do.
So it's about the process, actually. It's the actual living of it,
yes,
as opposed to the looking back and thinking.
Or front.
I
always say today is the most important day of my life. Not tomorrow, because I don't know about tomorrow. And yesterday doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do an assessment of how successful your life was, you just look back and count the good days and the good deeds you did, the good achievements you had, and it doesn't matter what comes next.
Well, you can't control it anyway.
Yeah, but if you have enough of it, but you know how much planning people do for the future.
Of course, but at the end of the day, we all know that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but they still do it. They still do it.
So what's next for you? Are you're stepping back from work a bit, or is it? Are you still very involved?
Yeah, I've been trying since I was 55. No, I'm not involved anymore as much as I used to be, for sure.
Your son is more involved now, I think.
He had to come back because we lost our CEO, and he had to come back, help find a new one, and actually gradually start relieving me from a lot of other investments outside the Orascom. Mm-hmm. We still have a family office with a lot of stuff. Because I'm not getting the same kick.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
And if you're not very happy in what you're doing, then you won't do a good job.
Absolutely.
So for me, I have a couple of little things that I do left and right, but to be actually looking at Excel sheets and numbers and how much.
Well, you obviously also have a lot of interest, so you don't need it anymore just to do it.
It's really dwindled to be one more activity that I do as part of my day.
Yeah.
And not like the thing like it used to be when I was young. I mean, it's not like I've always been like this, but I've always made space for other things. On the price of being more successful or make more money or whatever, I was always willing and capable of letting go some of the success in business or in money making for me to enjoy the rest. But now making money or business in general has dwindled to be literally one of many activities.
Samih, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
That was absolutely lovely. Before I sign off today, I'd like to take a moment to thank so many of you for leaving such amazing reviews about the show on the different podcast platforms, and for the wonderful feedback from listeners on Instagram. I'm really delighted that this show has resonated with so many people, and I'm overwhelmed by the heartfelt compliments the show has received from far and wide. Please keep listening. Thank you for joining me on What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad, and this episode was co-produced by Chirag Desai. I'd love to hear from you, so please connect with me on Instagram by searching for What I Did Next. I hope that you'll be able to join me again in 2 weeks' time for the next episode.